Guests in the Seat of Honor on the Believe Me Movement podcast will share with us their personal experiences of either seeing a UFO, being abducted, or any paranormal experience that they're trying to make sense of. As you listen, you are about to have a mind-bending experience. Are you ready? We're not telling you what to think, but we do ask you to be open-minded. You must be pondering by now, what is the Believe Me Movement podcast? We offer you a relaxed and safe space for those of you courageous enough to share your profound and sometimes befuddling experiences as a live guest on our podcast. When you are ready to be a guest on our show and share your story, email me at spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. That's spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. And I'll gratefully put you on the wait list and contact you soon. Best-selling author Ken Sylvester of the book We're Not Alone and Here's the Proof, and me, Spirit Lady Robin Alexis, best-selling author of the book A Conversation with Extraterrestrials, are your hosts of the Believe Me Movement podcast and soon-to-be membership. The Believe Me Movement podcast is brought to you by RobinAlexis.com. That's RobinAlexis.com. Ken, are you ready to bring on our guest today to sit in the seat of honor of the Believe Me Movement podcast?
Yes, Robin, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our guest, Darielle, has to tell us today. We're ready to listen to your story. Please tell us about you.
Well, thank you, Robin and Ken. This is very exciting. And a little bit about me before I go into the stories is decades as a hypnotherapist and always as an energy healer from childhood. But the lightning experience took me from being a totally fearless person to being afraid of everything and then walking, to wellness again. But it did expand not only my mind, but my perceptions of things, and really about helping people, about healing and seeing things in much more in depth. And it did help me be aware of much more finer and subtle shifts in energy, whether it's, driving or walking or talking to somebody, just that expanded awareness and consciousness. And one of the stories that I would like to share with people that was very profound was back in the 80s, I used to teach some classes up in Snoqualmie. I worked in the rock chalet and helped healers or skiers with healing stones and that. But we used to go up and afterwards, and we would go to, it's called Little Cachice. And it's just past Snoqualmie about 20 minutes. And in our healing group, any number of times, there were like triangle objects that would be there for 10 to 15 minutes, anywhere from like 3 to 5 of these objects and formations, and they were very fascinating to watch. It was like a dance in the sky. There would be like 2, and then there would like be 3 coming, and they dance around, and then there would be 1, and they would form a circle, and it was like watching a performance. And there was like about 10 of us that watched this over a period of months, almost maybe a year. And nothing ever went beyond just that visual, and it was generally, probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes it was a little later. And we all remarked that nothing ever happened, but you could just feel the energy, you could feel your hair raise up. You could just feel like there was like electricity. None of us ever received burns or anything. We just watched this wonderful display in the sky. It was fascinating.
And this was in the state of Washington?
In Washington State, and Snoqualmie is, one of our big ski resorts, and the Rock Chalet, it's no longer there. That was very fascinating. And it's just beyond that, continuing on the I-90, about 20 miles, and it's like there's Little Cachice, and then there's Lake Cachice where my friends lived, and so we would meet at their house and then come back to Little Kachis. And Little Kachis is where all of this happened. And it happened with more than one group of people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Ken, you must have questions for her.
Yeah. So do you think that they knew you were there and they were like putting on a show for you?
Well, a couple of us talked about that. Yeah, we kind of felt like we were guests of honor at times because it was such a display. And whenever we came, we would be there sometimes for like 20 minutes or a half an hour, and then they would come, or we would be driving up, and we would be seeing them coming into like a formation, and then we would bring our blankets and our hot chocolate and food, and it was just fascinating to watch. It was like outdoor theater, but nothing ever went beyond that display in the sky. They didn't come down or swoop us or anything. It was just above us, but we all felt that energy, and I think that in each of my encounters, Little Kachis was known for having, like a high energy or anomalies. And I think that they're drawn to like a high energy or frequencies just from my experiences that I've had. But there were like 10 of us that we each experienced the same thing. Never felt threatened or afraid, just felt like guests of honor at this marvelous display.
Wow. Did you receive any message telepathically, do you feel, from them?
Not that I recall from those. It was just a feeling of more like just being happy, like just being shown that you're not alone. Like the title of your book is that,
right.
That there are other things beyond us. But we all experienced, happy, kind of excited, and just expanding your mind that we are not the only ones here and present. And as a hypnotherapist, dealing with people's unconscious and working with things, very rooted in, linear stuff in my jobs had always been very linear. And so this was, like mind expanding for all of us. It was like taking you out of your everyday to expand your mind that these things can exist, whatever they may be, is that something that isn't your everyday norm.
Right. Continue on with your story.
Well, that was it really for about that, and it went on for a period of time.
Hang on a second.
Groups of people.
Yeah, hang on a second. You're listening to Darielle Archer. She is in the guest seat of honor on the Believe Me Movement podcast. And Darielle is quite a person you actually need to get to know. She's the author of the book, The Thriving Code, A Guide for Healing and Energy Protection. And at the beginning of the show, before she started telling us about one of her 3 experiences with UFOs and aliens, she mentioned something about, I think you said you were electrocuted. Is that what you said?
I was struck by lightning in the back of the head. And
you want to tell us? Tell us a little bit about that and how people can find you. And one of the other questions I have, actually I'll ask you after you answer these, and then we'll go into the next story. So tell us about the lightning and where people can find you.
Okay. The lightning story was, I was out, if you live in Seattle, the surrounding area, in the Renton Highlands, and all day long I just had this very apprehensive feeling. It's like, it's like, don't go. And it's like, oh, I've already committed. And I was helping these women to ask for raises from their bosses or to have a greater voice. And I was doing, like private sessions with people, and we were doing like energy work and healing. And then we would work collectively, after that and, have a little nosh. And there was quite a rainstorm, and all of a sudden there was this loud boom, and the house behind us, there was like a hole blown in a fence, by a group of trees. And the Renton Highlands are, is in greater elevation. There's a lot of trees. And the second one, it was like behind us, I had the window behind me, and it was open a little bit, and it was like it arced and then arced back and came through the window and struck me in the side of the head. And I remember having that feeling of, oh my gosh, it's like I've been struck. It's like, oh my gosh, I could feel myself like I was leaving my body, like I was dying. I felt, all of this stuff, and I could feel myself leaving. And this little voice inside says, hey, you're a hypnotherapist. Become a copper coil. Let it pass through you. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll become a copper coil. And it literally did that energy.
Wow, you saved your own life.
It really was, and it came out, and it was like this kind of smoky stuff on this table that came out, because normally after researching all of this, is that, people die not from getting struck, but it's the exit of the electricity that kills people or maims them and hurts them. I didn't have mine. Mine actually just came out of my fingertips. It just literally, and I felt myself coming back into my body. But for a while there, it lasted quite some time, where I would walk by cars, and when I left that day, I walked by the cars and all the alarms started going off.
Oh my gosh. Now, did you have this experience before or after this first vision of
the first encounter?
UFO?
It was, I think it was after that. It was in the late 80s, probably about like 85, I think. And it lasted for a period of time. You set off the alarms at the airport, which was not always fun.
No.
And then when I got home, I walked past the TV and it changed channels.
Wow.
And my husband goes, don't touch my recording equipment. Stay away from my record. Do not demagnetize anything, because, he had some very expensive recorders and that. But one of the other benefits or side effects was that when I would, my credit cards demagnetized, and so did my recording machines at that time. So it was really hard to keep anything that had a magnetic strip, or if I would record something often, it would be blank. And that went on for a number of years, and it finally subsided. That as one thing they tell you is we don't know how to get electricity really out of the body. And I'm thinking, well, it's electricity. So I worked with copper paddles and like biocircuits, little square things with two round connectors, and would lay on those. And literally would go into that. And I could feel it leaving. And when I got up one time, my husband was going, come here, come here, come here. And we went, and where I had laid on the floor, there was an outline of like smoke, like this weird energy. But it was like, it's like, it makes sense. It's like it's discharging the electricity out of your body. That's, copper's known for that. So that's really how, I treated myself, and then, really I started to have panic attacks, or I could smell the ozone, sort of like horses get really upset, or animals, 2 to 8 hours before a storm comes, and I could feel all of that.
I can't even imagine dealing with the magnitude of that. Ken, is there anything else you'd like to ask her before I say something else, and then we'll go into her next story?
No, continue on. I'm just listening intently. It's very, very, very interesting.
Yes, this is the Believe Me Movement podcast. I'm here with my co-host, best-selling author Ken Sylvester of the book We're Not Alone, and here's the proof. I'm Robin Alexis, and I am the author of the book A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. And we are here today with our extraordinary guest in the seat of honor on the Believe Me Movement podcast. Her name is Darielle Archer, and I highly recommend you Google her, you find out about her, and maybe she'll tell us even which website to send you to get in touch with her, because she is one amazing woman. She even healed herself from being struck by lightning, which is not easy to heal yourself. So, wow. Okay, Darielle, what would you like to tell us next?
Well, I would just say people can get a hold of me at Darielle@DarielleArcher.com if they, want to speak to me or schedule. And then the website is academy.ms. energy first aid. And I'm thinking, what do we need when we're in trouble? We need energy first aid.
That's perfect. And I'm sure if you send me your information, we'll put it in the show notes when the show goes up, because we want everyone to find you. So, Darielle, what other stories do you have to share?
Yeah, that lightning story, I think that was in 99. The other one that I have that was quite interesting is my husband and I were in Alki in
And where's Alki? Which state?
Alki Beach is in Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
And it's really a lovely, lovely beach. And it's really lovely at night because it's, you go over like a little bridge, and then you're looking back at the city of Seattle. It's almost like a little peninsula area, that Alki Beach area. It's really quite lovely. And this was in 99. And that's actually when I got hit, but it was after the, let's see, was it after the lightning? I can't remember if it was after or before. Anyway, we're sitting there on the blanket, and we're just, having one of those romantic times, and we're looking at the city and, making plans and laughing and talking about things. And all of a sudden, we're looking at the city, and the city's gone. I mean, there's the lights, and there's Seattle and the Space Needle, and, it's all lit up, and it's beautiful. And then blink, it's gone. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he goes, "Where'd it go?" And I'm going, "I'm not sure. There's no fog. It's still clear." We were looking up at the sky, and I think, well, there's, stars around it. When we looked at the city, it was like it was blank, but there were no stars above the city. It was just on the perimeter there were stars. And then that feeling came where we don't know exactly what it was, but it passed over our heads, and it blanked out the stars above us. And this lasted from the city coming to us for, I don't know, a good 3 to 5 minutes. And as it went over us, we could just feel this heightened sense, like our hair was like waving, and you could feel this like energetics on our skin. And when you looked up, there was nothing, and it was silent, but there were no stars. And whatever it was passed over us, then the stars and everything came back. I mean, we still to this day, it was a moment of total disbelief of, looking at your city, and then suddenly your city is gone, looking at the stars, and suddenly the stars are blanked out. It was very strange. We never did figure that out, but just it left you in your mind. Again, it's like there are things that we just don't understand, and it was the quietness, and it was a huge area. It was like your field of vision. Everything was just blank. It was just darkness during that time.
Do you think it was caused by a really huge mothership like they had in Phoenix one time that was like a mile wide, or do you think it was a combination of something else?
That I don't know. I just know one minute we're looking at the stars in the sky in our city, and the next minute it's not there. So it could have been, whatever it was massive. But it didn't have any sounds. There were no lights. It was just this...
Well, in researching, I came across this several times, so most of the time it turned out that it was just a huge mothership. But from what you're describing, sounds like it covered a much larger area that would not probably explain what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it moved. I mean, it's like when it was over the city, you could still see the stars and stuff above us. But as it moved, then it would, wherever it would blank out the stars from above. It was like I don't know what it was, but suddenly the stars, it was a really clear, crystal clear, beautiful night. And that it would just struck us. And as it went over us, it was, quite wide, because it stopped your field of vision. I mean, it filled your field of vision. And then as it passed over, everything returned to normal. And as we watched it, we turned around and looked, and then, everything was like returned to normal. As we turned around after we got over the shock, we're looking, there was nothing further. But it was it was so startling in just watching your city on a beautiful night and you're having a romantic encounter, and then all of a sudden nothing's there, and then it comes back. It was like, wow, kind of ruined the moment, but But again, it was just something that's so far out of what you normally know or feel, that had no explanation. I mean, there was nothing. There was no sound. There was no lights. Other than that feeling of that static, that electricity, or the electromagnetics that you feel. When your hair stands on end and you can feel that prickly feeling on your arms, but there was nothing that you could take a picture of. It was just, a blank sky.
What strikes me the most about what you have said is that you seem to be comfortable with not knowing.
Well, I think in having, some encounters, it's like it expands your awareness that it can include things that you don't understand, and that to explore them and to be okay. But if you're in fear, you shut down your mind, and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want my awareness to expand to include anomalies or things that I don't understand, and comfortable with it. I mean, that's a reality. It happened, whether I wanted it to or believe it or not. It was something that happened. And there's no denying. My husband and I, we've talked about it a couple times, and never had anything. But each of these areas were really high energy, really high energy areas that people, like Little Kachis, people, kind of avoided a lot. But Alki Beach, people loved it. I mean, people would go there. It was always filled with people and love and excitement and kids, and and it was a different energy. And the last story is very neat, very unique. And that happened. Let's see, that was in '99. The Lake Kachis, I think, was '85, and this one was like in 2005. My next story.
Ken, do you want to ask us some more questions before she goes to her next story?
No, not at this time. I'm ready to hear the next story.
Okay, let's go.
I wish I had more details on that story. I don't. That was just, one of those.
It's quite detailed.
It's very, well, when something startles your memory, it embeds, in your unconscious and your muscle memory and that stuff. The last one was in Tibet, in Lhasa.
Wow.
And so I was on a spiritual journey. So a lot of this, was being on, and maybe they're drawn to people that are really on a spiritual journey and asking and questioning what's the universe, and who are we and what can we do, and other people out there, because I can't believe that we're the only species in all of the universe. It just doesn't gronk with me. Anyway, I was walking in Tibet, and it was daylight, and I'm walking with my friends, and we just, I drug her to Tibet because I really had this draw to go see the Portola Palace and visit Tibet. It just was, like on my bucket list. And we're walking in broad daylight, and there's these, and these actually did look like ships. They were in the distance. They were sort of, like the round shape, and they would be flying into the mountains. And, we're walking, there's a group of people, and we're walking, and we're turning around, following them as they're going in, and everybody else is looking at them like, oh, it's no big deal. They just kept walking. It's like, oh, okay, well, that happens every day. And, and later that night, we were there for, about, I forget how long we were there, about a week, maybe 10 days. And so we went out at night, and they were going back into the mountains. So we started asking people, like, in the hotel and where we went, and when we went to, the Portola Palace and Yohang Palace and that. It's like, oh, yeah, we see them all the time. They've been there as far, my parents talked about it, my grandparents. It's like, this is like everyday stuff. It was like nothing was abnormal, and nobody talked about, any sort of landings or anything. They just saw these ships, and accepted them as normal, and they just said that they're there all the time.
Were the ships in any kind of formation, or was it just seemed just like a large group? And
it was a smaller group. This was only like maybe three. Though what we witnessed, 2 or 3 times, was just like 3 of them at a time, and they weren't in formation. They were going like 1, 2, 3, rather than like in a triangular formation or anything. But they were going behind the mountains. As you turn around and look from where we were, that is just nothing but mountains there, and they would go in and disappear, and you wouldn't see anything, and then later at night you would see something, or during the daytime, and there was no set time. We would just see them periodically, and people would see them, and the little kids would point at them. They would be very excited, and the mom goes, well, it's that's normal, honey. They're just here all the time. And so nobody was rattled by it or afraid of it. They just accepted it as that's part of what the mountain spirit is.
Were there lights also on these UFOs?
There was one light on the domed part. As I recall.
So there was a dome on top. Did they have an antenna sticking out of the dome too, or you couldn't tell?
It was too far away to see.
Okay.
There was an illumination more in the dome. It was quite a distance away, and you could see them, but you couldn't see them really clearly. With the naked eye. If I'd had binoculars or something, I could have seen something better, but just with the naked eye, we just saw them moving. And they weren't moving at a particularly fast speed. They were just kind of cruising along, It was out for a Sunday flight or something. It was just sort of leisurely flying, to the mountains. It was just such an odd feeling, and, as my friend and I, Wanda and I talked about it. She goes, what do you think? And I says, I don't really know. I says, but, it's something. I says, nobody seems to be affected and, startled except, the visitors or those of us that were aware. And there were, other people that turned around. But it was such an odd encounter. But it was in such a beautiful setting. But again, really, Lhasa has really extraordinarily high energy and spiritual energy. You just truly feel that, at the roof of the top of the world is what they call Lhasa.
And they were going into the mountains. Did any come out of the mountains in that same area, or did you always just see them going in?
We just saw them always going in, never saw anything coming out.
That must have been their entrance. I had done one of the stories. There were multiple sightings, and I figured it was an alien tour group that had promised, do you want to see what Earth looks like? And then they take a group of people and go on a exploration trip to Earth.
Oh, interesting. Tour ships, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
And a lot of them that I did were only 4 seats in the craft, so there was a small, real personal type of tour for the people, or the aliens that came here to see us. It's over a farm field, and they also like to check out cows in many of these adventures.
Right. Yeah, we didn't have, any of that. We just saw them at a distance, but they always seemed to be around high energy places. And I just got the feeling that, never a feeling of feeling, threatened or scared or anything like that. It was just, something that we were witness to. So those are my stories. They're never any encounter beyond just the visual seeing them, but just visually seeing them was really quite amazing. And just, it allowed you to feel that you were part of everything and that you were also part of the universe, that, you were here and there was something outside of your normal belief and encounters that just kept expanding your awareness to, explore, don't be afraid, just, question, just kind of like when everything in mathematics and suddenly everything is now in the quantum field or the morphogenic fields, and that is that we're always expanding our knowledge, and what used to be, scary and unknown is part of our everyday life now.
And when you told the story to other people, like family and friends, did they accept it? Or did they find it believable, or did they give you a hard time?
No, they didn't. They were just saying, Daryl, unusual things always happen to you, so why wouldn't you have something like it?
I understand that.
And so they were they were curious, and I just thought, these are the details that I saw. It's like, if you see an unusual airplane, or the first time you would ever see a Concorde or something, it was just, relating what you saw and that experience. And then their big thing is like, were you afraid? Did you know what it was? Were there any sounds? It's like, no, it was just, a visual was really too far to see, and that. And they, they were pretty open-minded. I didn't really have any skeptics. It's like, well, and they always felt like I did, or a lot of them. It's like, we can't be the only people here in the universe, or only living creatures or beings, right, that inhabit this universe. So I think I dealt with very smart, open-minded people, and I never really encountered a lot of skepticism in that, probably because I work in the energy world and have had, great healings and that with people. And so that I felt that, I am, I'm a truthful person, and I try to relay what I say. And see, it's like when people come to healing, it's like being as honest you can, and you don't want to scare them. That's kind of how I felt that watching this stuff, is that we were being shown something not to scare us, but to expand our awareness.
And did you find that that experience then, I imagine, helped you in your healing process, because you were an experiencer? You weren't just an outsider that observed these things. You were there to observe them in person.
True. I never really thought about it in that way. That was just, I observed it and just that experience, but it was never anything about fear. It was like, this is something that happened that, again, expanded my awareness, that it happened multiple times, that was just informing me that this is not something that is like one-off, that it's taking place. And being that the inhabitants of Lhasa, it was so normal to them. It's like, oh yeah, it's been going on for decades. My mom and my grandmother and my uncle and my aunt, and it was like, it was commonplace, which I found was so startling. And they just seemed, and they're very evolved, very spiritual, the happiest people I've ever met. They just beautiful smiles and laughter, and they talked about him. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, we see him. We talked about him as school kids and that, and it just was so normal.
Yes, I saw a special on Tibet one time, and they were showing a group of monks doing meditation, and there was about 75 or 100 of them, and they collectively were able to draw energy out there and bring in UFOs for viewing.
Wow. Oh, interesting. Yeah, their voices, like when we went in and had a ceremony with the monks, it was quite lovely, and the sound is very, very haunting. Even now I can hear it, and all of that, the palaces, the Yohang, it's very, very high energy. I could see that happening, because when you listen to that sound, and like you said, 75 or 80 people, it's phenomenal. You just feel this incredible energy. You feel peaceful. And they're actually, when they do call that, they have like two tones to their voice. When they're singing or chanting, they have not just one tone, but there's another tone beneath it.
Yeah, that was the other thing that kept coming up, was tones or vibrations or some specific sounds that seemed to emanate or attract them. When we were doing the experiments out at Skinwalker Ranch, they had the Native Americans beating on the drums, and eventually, after doing it for about 10 minutes, a UFO did appear.
Well, it makes sense with vibration and frequency and that, and the energetics. I could see that because it's attracting, or it's the frequency that they speak on or work with. I could see that.
And they had that in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you remember, too.
Right. That the beautiful music in that. But, like music is mathematics. And so why wouldn't people or other beings understand sound and vibration and frequency and energy?
Yeah, it does make sense, yeah.
Yeah, so to me it does. And, it's we all do it. We get that feeling of, oh, this feels right, or we'll go someplace like, oh, this feels wrong, or it's like, oh, I know I shouldn't go do this, or it's like, oh, I'm so excited, I can't wait till this happens. We all are reading energy and frequency and vibration. If you want to know the universe, learn about frequency, vibration, and sound, and you will get, I think, more cues to the universe. So that's, those are my stories. I hope they help people and to, keep expanding your awareness and embrace, that you're evolving. If you're seeing stuff that, you're evolving.
Darielle, I do have a question for you. You did say that, you've had good response when you would tell family, friends, or acquaintances about these experiences. How does it feel to come on the podcast and talk about it?
It feels kind of, it feels normal, is that hopefully it will help people who've had encounters not to feel fearful. And if people want to make fun and do stuff, well, that's fine. Those are just my encounters. If you want to believe it, great. If you don't, great. But those were my experiences, and it was always with other people. But they were, it was, a lot of them were so long ago. Nothing recently, since I really, have come and really healed from the lightning.
Well, these type of stories, the reason we lays it, believe me, is even Robin can tell you from her experience that was a very difficult time when her parents wouldn't believe her from the abductions. And that's why we said the Believe Me movement is, if you hear multiple stories from multiple different persons, it becomes more convincing and able for them to understand. And so these are great stories to have shared. And I think that the listeners will indeed, after they repeatedly keep hearing stories, will hopefully at least have an open mind.
Well, that would be very helpful, because people, when you get afraid of something, you close down your mind and your awareness, and you like some people want to see things so badly, and rather than just allowing things to unfold, I think is something else that happens to people. It becomes like a psychic wake where when you're calm and you see things, you see more clearly. When you're upset or fearful, it's like looking in water. It's distorted. It's like ripples and little waves on the water. So I think this is a great idea, and I feel very honored to be here. And to me, I just felt it was very normal and natural to tell stories of things that happened. And I always feel very blessed. I feel lucky and blessed, and maybe that's why people, I didn't encounter a lot of skeptics, and even if they did, my motto is, thank you for listening. Bless and release you. You're certainly welcome to believe whatever you want. I'm just relaying what my experiences were. So thank you for having me on today. Is there any other questions you've had? Well,
actually, I do, but Ken, do you have any further questions?
No, I'm going to pass it on to you, Robin.
Okay. So grateful, Darielle Archer, for being our guest in the Seat of Honor today on the Believe Me Movement podcast. I have two questions for you. One is, I do know you are an extraordinary healer. For people who are listening, including myself, would you be interested in being like one of the healers that we could refer people to you for healing if they're traumatized from an experience with extraterrestrials?
Absolutely, yeah. In hypnotherapy, I did some, work with the trauma and that and fears. Certainly, it would be absolutely honored to help anybody in pain and fear and things that they've encountered.
Well, I might like to, if Ken goes along with it and you go along with it, have you come back on another show and kind of use me and my story and have you help me feel more comfortable with my childhood abduction so people could witness how you work and what it feels like to have a healing through the techniques that you use. So put that in your hat. And then the other thing I have to ask you about is, do you do remote hypnotherapy, like on Zoom or something?
I don't do remote hypnotherapy per se. Well, anytime you close your eyes, you're in an altered state. But yeah, I do. Most of my work is remotely, whether it's for people or animals.
Okay, so say, for example, someone is wondering whether they've been abducted. Could they call you for a session and you'd help guide them through whether they did or didn't have one?
Certainly, yeah. You can talk to them and you can ask them. It's more of like a conversational hypnotherapist where you don't really have to go into the trance, but you can ask questions because your body will remember, where they don't have to face the trauma or have them, like you're watching a movie where they're removed and they feel safe, especially if it was really traumatic. That safety is a really a key issue, especially when you're dealing with phenomena and and trauma and fear and feeling that you don't have any. It causes PTSD.
Yes, I have PTSD from multiple experiences, and I would love to, if it's appropriate, share it with, the podcast community, and if not, well, we'll do it differently. But for anyone who's listening and understands the type of service that Darielle offers, how can they get a hold of you?
They can contact me at Darielle@DarielleArcher.com, or they can go on to academy.energyfirstaid.com, and there's a contact list that they can look at. I believe there's a Calendly where they can schedule something. But I always like to talk to the person first rather than just, like book somebody. It's just, get a feel and see if we're really a good fit. Because it's very personal and it's very detailed. And when you're dealing with trauma, you just want to make sure you're a good fit for that person.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Part of the reason she asked that actually was for myself. I recently did go to a hypnotherapist just a couple days ago, but he did not, I don't feel like he hypnotized me or even got close to it. He wasn't able to draw out any information that I was able to tell him when I was sitting there and we were talking about my story. What happened is Robin was in a hypnotic session. We got a recording of it and a printout. And during that time while she was being hypnotized, she came up with a statement, the one Ken doesn't know it, but he's been abducted multiple times. Now, I've never had any memories or bad dreams or anything to indicate in my life that I can recall that I have been abducted. But I am curious to find out, but I think it would take going to the regressive hypnosis, I guess it's referred to, and going deeper inside me to find out if in my subconscious somehow I buried this or the aliens controlled it and I can't recall it. Do you think you could help someone like me?
We could certainly give it a try. We wouldn't be in person; it would be on Zoom. But I would like to, to get. Oftentimes they are buried, and that also it depends upon if we have really a stigma about, being laughed at or shamed, or if that's something that's already in, your in your life or that you've experienced, it can delay some of how things come up. And a lot of things, like in hypnotherapy, there are things that we do, it's called the convincers, to make sure that you're really hypnotized in that. And, it's like, to watch people, there's like the hypnotic mask that you can't fake, is that when you look at somebody in hypnosis, there are things that happen, that changes that you can't fake. It's, like coloring changes, the muscles change, even how the coloring in your cheeks, even in your ears, you have what's called idiomotor signals that change. And a lot of times, rather than talking, I've done whole sessions where people didn't talk, but they worked with their hands. One side would be accepting and one side wouldn't be, and they would work out through the whole session with their hands until they came to an agreement, and then the hands would clasp, and they would come to an agreement with it was called parts therapy, which Charles Tibet taught. It was called Miracles on Demand. It's an amazing technique called parts therapy that I learned decades ago. And I actually learned hypnosis when I was in high school doing gymnastics. We had a trainer that took us into that where you would close your eyes, you'd go into that altered state. You would, see that point where you were doing something, that piece of music. If you fell, you picked yourself up on the next note and you would continue. You wouldn't shame or blame yourself. You would just pick yourself up and go forward. Because to lose focus, wherever your head goes, your body will follow. So if you're tumbling at 30 and 40 miles an hour, you do not want to turn your head and get distracted or hitting the vault or the balance beam or the uneven or the bars. You need to be totally, completely present. So I feel really lucky that I learned that. And then as I went into it, it was fascinating because in our class you had to be hypnotized 2 to 4 times, 5 times a night, so that you knew what it felt like, so that you were, by the time, and then I practiced outside of class. So I had 1,000 hours after class, during class, before I graduated, I had 1,000 hours that I'd already done because I did it 7-8 hours. I call up all my friends and says, hey, I know you got this problem. Would you like some help? Would you like, and I always say, would you like to be, help me be a friend in training and we'll work with hypnosis and stuff. And I had a lot of people that wanted to come and to explore it, or, for healing, or whatever they wanted, better communication with people or having a voice and that. So I find that it's really comfortable. You can begin to ask yourself some questions, and you can kind of like test your body. Like you can do something like right now, you can say, just take a couple breaths, because when we take a couple deep breaths, again, we're in an altered state. And Ken, if you want to close your eyes, and you can just, just ask yourself, have I been abducted? And does your body move? Do you want to lean forward? Do you want to lean back? Does it stay still? Do you go to the left? Do you go to the right? And just try that for a moment or two. Just breathe in, like 3, and then exhale 3. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 3, and then exhale. And then, or pause, and then start again. So breathe in 3, 2, 3. Hold for 3, 1, 2, 3. Exhale 3, 1, 2, 3. Pause for 3, and now ask yourself that question.
Yeah, I'm not feeling anything.
Okay.
I may be too distracted right now to be able to do that. Maybe we can talk off air. And
absolutely. Well, you can feel that. It's like, if your body wants to lean forward or back, or if it wants any movement, if it just stays still. And like you say, when you're distracted, being in a place, we can talk off the air for that.
Yeah,
but it's just one of the...
I'd like to learn more about it. The only other sign I had is I wear a watch that counts my steps. I don't care about the time, but I have to regulate it because I have bad leg cramps. And I sleep in a recliner. And the one morning I woke up and I looked and I had somehow in my sleep put on 215 steps, but I was fully reclined and never got out of that position. And so that made me kind of curious, and this happened after Robin had informed me that I had apparently been abducted multiple times. Other than that, I've never had any evidence of anything happening.
Right.
Well, for everyone, go ahead.
I was just going to say for him, the walking and his steps, a lot of times we work out things by movement in our sleep, and that you could very easily do a couple hundred steps because you would be like walking or you'd be working things out, and that's how your body, we work when we're in sleep. We're processing what happened daily to us, and oftentimes, like restless legs and a lot of cramps we don't have enough magnesium, or our potassium, sodium levels are not in sync, our electrolytes. But that can be something that's very, very common for people. They wake up and they're tired because they have done walk or traveling or moved their arms, or their back doesn't feel comfortable, or it feels way more comfortable. They worked out something in the kinks and their neck and back feel better upon awakening. So,
and this all occurs still while I'm in the rocking chair. In other words, I haven't physically got up, but just done it mentally in my mind while in the chair.
Right, your body would be moving. Your unconscious mind, you would be processing information, and especially if something that was really, challenging your known belief system. It's like, no, I have no memory, and then your mind would be going back looking and probably sorting us as, did this really happen? Am I burying it? Did I tell someone, or was it something that, happened in, childhood or young adulthood? And seeing how you feel about it would cause your body to, your mind, your unconscious mind, to work it out so it could come to an agreement with the conscious mind.
Wow, that's totally new information. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, this has been the Believe Me Movement podcast that you've been listening to with our very special guest today in the seat of honor, Darielle Archer. And Darielle has explained to us her 3 experiences witnessing with other people seeing spacecraft. And she also has been explaining to us how she can be of service to any of us who are listening. If you've had an experience, or you're wondering, like Ken, if you've had an experience, someone like Darielle Archer is a healer and a hypnotist that can help you sort that out. So you can come be a guest on our show, and hopefully Darielle will come back and give us an example of how she could help someone. I'm going to volunteer, and we'll talk about that later. But for now, this has been the Believe Me Movement podcast. If you would like to be a guest on our show, simply email me at spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. That's spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. We want to hear your experiences. And this show has been brought to you by robinalexis.com. We do advise you to like and subscribe to the Believe Me Movement YouTube channel, so that when we post new things, which we do a lot, Ken's going to start doing some things even beyond this show. And unless you're subscribed, you're not going to know when these things are uploaded. So go ahead and like and subscribe to the Believe Me Movement YouTube channel and stay informed. Darielle, I bow deeply to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for possibly coming back on and sharing how you can help our listeners get more comfortable with their own experiences. And thank you, Ken, too, for everything. You're just awesome. You started this whole thing. Thank you both.
Right. Thank you.
All right, over and out.
Over and out.